Okay, this video is about subtracting integers and a little bit about multiplying. And this is all on one sheet. So we're going to look at a few examples of subtracting integers with the negative positive diagrams that we've been talking about in class. I want to just remind you again of the things that we've talked about. Situations where negative integers come up would be like when we have debt. Oh no, my pen isn't working. So negatives in real life, and you can jot these down too. Debt and temperature, and what else have we talked about? Even just like the English language, double negatives. Like I'm not happy is the same as saying I am happy, essentially. I'm not happy, or I guess a neutral expression or a neutral feeling. So double negatives equals a positive, and that's ultimate, an elevation. So if we removed some negative elevation, you'd essentially be going up. So taking away negatives, taking away negative debt, taking away debt has the effect of basically giving you money. Removing negative temperature would have the effect of going up. So anytime you're removing negatives, I'm going to write this over here. Basically, removing negatives has a positive effect. And that's worth making a big note to yourself. Because removing is a negative thing, and taking away negatives makes something go up. So here's a visual of that with negative and positive diagrams. So in example 1, if I have negative 3 and I want to take away 2 negatives, I can draw 3 negatives. Here's negative 3, and then this is negative 3 minus 2 negatives, leaves me with just this one negative here. So this is a really simple one because we have enough negatives already to just take them away. Example 2, we have negative 5, and we want to take away 2 positives. And that's a little bit different because if I draw 5 negatives, then I want to take away 2 positives. I don't have 2 positives here, but I can add them by adding zeros. If I add 2 positives and 2 negatives, then this is still a picture of negative 5, but now I have enough positives that I can take away 2 positives. And when I take away 2 positives, then I can see that I have 7 negatives remaining. So I can see really clearly here that negative 5 minus 2 gives me negative 7. Now for a problem like this, some people might like to think about a number line, and that's okay too, to think if I'm at 0, or I'm sorry, if I start at negative 5 and I go go take away 2 more positives, then this is like minus 2 and it would put me at negative 7. And that would be okay too, to think about this in whatever way makes most sense to you. The way to do it with a positive-negative diagram is illustrated here, but if that doesn't make sense to you, try thinking about a number line, and if you start at negative 5 and then take away 2, you'd end at negative 7. Then there's this example, 3 minus negative 3. So I have 3 positives, and I want to take away 3 negatives, but I can't remove negatives that aren't there. So I can add 3 zeros, a positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. This is still representing the total value of 3. And then I have the 3 negatives that I want to take away, and it shows that when I take away those negatives, I have more positives left behind. So this is like 3 plus 3, essentially, while illustrating that you're taking away negatives. So it's okay, too, to start to think to yourself, okay, I know that taking away negatives is like adding a positive, so I'm just going to rewrite this equation. I'm going to write this as 3 plus 3. It's not quite as clear of a visual of the situation, but it is okay to remind yourself taking away negatives is like adding a positive, so I'm just going to rewrite the problem to think about it. All right, and then finally, we can also think about double negatives in writing, and I think I referred to this up above, so in writing or speaking. If you wrote, I haven't got no cookie, then you'd be incorrect, as you'd actually be stating that you do have a cookie. I haven't got no cookie. kind of like saying, I do have a cookie. I don't have no cookie, so I must have a cookie. And those double negatives always make people go, wait, what are you saying? But if you really think about it, not having having no cookie means that you do have a cookie. So some people that helps, and some people it doesn't. So take what you want. Multiplying integers is the last part that we're going to talk about here. When two factors have the same sign, like they're both positive or they're both negative, the product will be positive. So today in class we looked at this example of taking away 3 groups of -2, and then we could rewrite that as subtraction minus -2 minus -2 minus -2, and that's basically like saying plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. So the effect, whether I write it in a shorter way with multiplication or I write it with removing negatives, subtracting negatives, the effect will be positive. So overall this is going to equal positive 6. Negative times a negative, removing groups of negatives is always going to just get us more positive, more positive, more positive. Similarly, if I just had positive 3 times positive 2, a positive times a positive is also going to be just a positive. But when one factor is negative and the other factor is positive, that's when the product will be negative. So for example, if I had -3 times 2, this is kind of like saying I want to remove, I view this first one as removing, but you might view it differently. I kind of picture this as a 0 minus 3 times 2. So I start with a 0, and then I want to take away 3 groups of positive 2. There's one group of positive 2 away, taking away another group of positive 2, taking away another group. And only one of these things is negative. So taking away is my negative, that's 3 times, and then I'm taking away 2 positives each time, which gives me -6 remaining. Now, another way to view that would be 3 times -2. One is positive, one is negative. This I view as 3 groups of 2 negatives, which I could just draw like this. 3 groups of 2 negatives, and the overall effect is that I have 6 negatives. So either way, whether I think about it as taking away positives, leaving me with negatives, or just drawing groups of negatives, one of those numbers is positive, one is negative, and the result is to have negatives. So we've done a lot of visualizing, a lot of diagramming, because it's really helpful to have something that you can go to make sense of a problem if you're feeling confused. But ultimately, we will start to remember and just operate under these rules that we've started to understand, that when I have 3 groups of 2 negatives, I'm going to have a bunch of negatives, and my result, my product, will be negative. If I am removing groups of negatives, I'm just going to keep making my answer more positive, and this is an important thing to help us remember, that ultimately a negative times a negative is a positive, and a negative times a positive is a negative. All right, that's all for now.